Ray.
I'm going to cast my vote based on the person's working knowledge with rural values, obviously connected with conservative values. But somebody that lives on ranch land and timberland, there's a lot of policies that may come before you, and you've got to have a working knowledge of the landscape. You know, I appeared before a judge, 17 years old, 18 years old, delivering firewood for my mom, and I got a ticket, and I went into the courtroom and pled no low contundere, thinking they'd throw it out because it went from the ranch to my mom's house, and I was fined $75 for hauling my mom's wood off the family ranch. The judge just didn't understand those rural values. So tell me your connectivity to the rural values of the lands in El Dorado County.
Let's start with Mr. Hoffman.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that I have small town values, so I understand that part of it. I live on 4 acres, so it's not like I'm on a huge ranch or anything like that, but I get the open space mentality, I get the small town feel, and I get the rural values. Will there be a learning curve? Absolutely. I think anyone in this job is going to have a learning curve. It's something that I've always dealt with in practice. I opened my law office right out of law school, and so I'm willing to put the time in to learn. That's the best thing I can tell you, and I think the quality that stands out for me about myself is that I'm willing to do the homework, willing to learn it, but my core values are very conservative and very small town rural values.
Well, it sounds like you were probably tagged for a county ordinance violation, maybe not having a permit or a license or something. Essentially, for 6.5 years, I handled all of the county ordinance violations that were not misdemeanors. So my feeling is that you have to use a little common sense when reviewing a county ordinance. If you've got a son taking, in your case, lumber from point A to mother's house, point B, I don't see that that's a commercial enterprise. I would have to question that. But I was a small business owner. 17 years I ran a dog kennel, met payroll, learned how to navigate through bureaucracy, and I would say that I would bring common sense to the bench. I'm very familiar with how businesses operate. I'm very familiar with how farms operate. And essentially I would bring all that into play, as well as go back and read the county ordinance, whatever violation has been alleged, and make a decision based on what is put before me.
Well, Ray, one of the reasons why I sought an appointment to this county was because this county shares the same values that I share, or to say it another way, I share the same values as I think the people of this county share. I'm conservative. I do believe in the Second Amendment. I believe that judges should apply the law, not legislate from the bench. In terms of the various county ordinances, I mean, I deal with them, have been dealing with them for 2 years, and you know, one of the typical kinds of ordinance that I see that comes into play in my mind with regard to the values out here is I see cases periodically about dog barking, disturbing the peace. And we've got this county ordinance out here that if dogs bark and disturb the peace, and then, you know, the folks will go out and they'll get a citation, they got to come in. And one of the things that I think a judge has to do is, and this is, I've said this to folks, I said, you know, one of the reasons why people move up here so they can have livestock and animals make noises, and dogs bark. So you've got to balance that against, of course, people do also come up here for peace and quiet, so they've got to balance that against it. And that's, I mean, I can't tell you how I decide every one of those cases. All I can tell you is that I put both of those in the scale, and I try and arrive at a just result. You know, in terms of other things with regard to the community, you know, I grew up in Sacramento, and my dad and I would come up here, and you know, I think there used to be a mill. I don't even know who owned the mill, but there used to be a mill out off of Latrobe Road. And you're talking about, you know, firewood, hauling off firewood. There used to be a mill out there, and we would go out there and pick up the, I call it the dross. It's the leftover stuff. We would take that and then use it as firewood. And my dad even had a firewood business and would sell it. Now back then, and I'm talking now the 60s, you didn't have all these licensing and permit requirements and all that kind of stuff. Today, you probably couldn't do those kinds of things. But I'm familiar with those kinds of freedoms, because we have the freedom to be able to come up here and do those kinds of things. And I'm also, you know, appreciate the values that we have up here, and we've got to balance those things.